In this module, we'll seek to understand welfare and Social Security policy, trying to describe issues related to poverty and the different perspectives about why it occurs and how we can address it. This realm of policymaking has us consider social welfare programs, which are federal and state programs that are meant to reduce poverty, are policies which improve the overall level of society by impacting and benefiting the most poor. The government, however, only has a handful of tools by which to actually do this. It can engage in education of the public, subsidizing certain behavior, creating new government programs, and even taxing. The two main areas we're going to focus on are Social Security policy and welfare. We'll have to understand who's covered by each program and how you can gain access to them. So then, what should our goals as a government and a society be pertaining to social welfare policy? Some argue that we should provide a minimum standard of living for those people in our society. When we think about the standard of living, we're concerned with an individual's level of wealth, comfort, material goods, and necessities available to them. As such, in relation to other members of society, what do individuals need to satisfy the minimum standard of living? Well, that then feeds into a next goal that some individuals put forward, helping individuals meet basic needs. Well, what are basic needs? Well, some of the most basic needs are food, drink, shelter, warmth, sleep, etc. So thus, as a society and a government, we can help to meet some of those most basic needs. Some individuals put forward that we should create opportunities for viable employment. This takes us back to an earlier module concept of the idea of full employment. Basically, if an individual wants a job, there should be one available for them. However, what is viable employment? Is it just any job? Or is it one you have to be trained for, have the skills for? Is it a job that provides a wage that you can live on? Is it temporary employment and has a lack of stability? Finally, some people consider protecting the vulnerable from most forms of exploitation. Where does this exploitation occur? It can be exploitation from others in society, from the strong, the rich. Some even go as far as to say it's protecting the vulnerable from the harshest outcomes of capitalism. Whatever the goal or goals we decide to pursue, all of them have something in common. They're seeking to help the lowest members of our society. With these goals in hand, we need to figure out how to actually target aid. Who needs help? In your reflection discussion board posting, you were asked to consider the idea of poverty and poorness and trying to understand if they are the same or different. Hopefully, you've come to the conclusion that they're not the same. Poverty is thought of as a condition by which people are unable to organize their lives to be self-sufficient. You can see how this starts to relate to some of the goals we were just talking about. Whereas poorness is an economic status which is brought on by a myriad of factors. Often, it's objective. Think about the US poor versus poor in other parts of the world. Thinking about poorness, we often think about low income. Low income is the outcome of these interrelated problems. However, it's not the problem. We're confusing cause and effect here. This is how they're different. Ultimately then, the government is concerned with poverty and figuring out an operational measure for poverty to help it then figure out how to target aid. The government thus comes up with a definition of poverty which is based on the income of the family unit as well as the size of the family. Why is the government concerned with income and family size? Well, they're interrelated. You can think about it this way. The more mouths to feed, the more it costs. Or your dollar only goes so far as you have more mouths to feed. Thus, using a formula based back in 1955 called the Thrifty Food Plan, the government tried to figure out how much it costs for a family of 4 to essentially live for a week or a month. At that point in time, groceries were about 1/3 of a family's budget each month. So, using the formula, they figured out, take a basket of goods in the grocery store. What's all going into your shopping cart? Your proteins, your grains, your vegetables, your dairy, etc. Figure out how much all that costs over the course of a month, and thus multiply it by 3. Having done so, the government comes up to a poverty level, or essentially a value by which a family or an individual could hope to persist for 1 month at the lowest cost available. The Department of Health and Human Services sets this each year and increases it based upon inflation and the impact it has on the cost of food. If you look down at this chart below, you can see that one person or a singular individual in a family can make a little over $12,000 a year and be considered in poverty. As you add more people into the family unit, well, you have more mouths to feed, and thus the poverty line raises. One thing that's problematic about this approach, however, is that all states base eligibility for many of their programs, as well as the federal government bases it, on the same poverty line. This level doesn't take into account differences from state to state, these differences being cost of living differences. And as such, the federal poverty level or federal poverty line is the same in a state like Pennsylvania or Virginia as it is in California. They only recently made changes that allowed Hawaii and Alaska to be slightly higher.